to welcome you all and thank you for joining us for today's event. This is the second in the Lunch and Learn webinars. We're delighted to present these with the support of AbilityNet, who we have been working closely with over the last couple of years on the importance of inclusivity, from the design of our products right the way through to the culture and the people within our organisation. This series of webinars will provide an introduction to the broad area of disability or impairments to include visual, hearing, physical, mental health and neurodivergence. We scheduled an hour here, but as always, it's dependent on your participation. And just before we get going, can you remember to please all go on mute and only come off if you'd like to raise a question in the Q&A session. If you sorry, so that should be at the end with Lizzie and Alex. If you rather type them in, you can do so, and Lizzie in a little while will be sharing a Slido which you can do there anonymously, so you don't have to actually give your name on that one. We are recording this webinar and Carol will share it out following this meeting, so keep your language clean. That's a reminder to myself more than anything else. So without further ado, let me introduce the two people that are more important than me. So today we're joined by Alex Barker and Lizzie Green from AbilityNet. So Alex Barker is a disability consultant at AbilityNet, and before that an advice and information officer. He's been working with AbilityNet for more than 18 years and in that time has seen technology evolve, as we all have. I'm going to do my best to pronounce this. So Alex has Moebius Syndrome, which is a very rare condition and it causes paralysis in facial muscles, clubfoot, missing limbs and sometimes cognitive issues too. And he'll be discussing with Lizzie the barriers he faces day to day and the ways in which simple adjustments and considerations can make a world of difference. And so on that note, I'm also delighted to welcome Lizzie today. Lizzie is a philosophy graduate and is one of AbilityNet's digital inclusion consultants. And Lizzie started working at AbilityNet in 2016. And over the years, she has worked her way up through the levels of the team and now responsible for developing and delivering workplace inclusion services to a range of clients across all sectors. Lizzie has worked at AbilityNet's administration manager, and which give her a wealth of experience to help multiple teams across the organisation. And Lizzie is passionate about assistive technology being widely available and easily accessible. As part of the role, she runs techno demo events and showcase free and low-cost apps that help in education. So the session will include an Ask Me Anything opportunity at the end. And so, you know, Alex will bring his experience and the design decisions that cause friction for him. This is a brilliant opportunity for all of us in the software developers to understand more about these challenges so that we can develop software that is inclusive for all. So without further ado, over to Lizzie and Alex.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Pauline, for that lovely introduction. I am now just going to share some slides, so hopefully that has all come up with you. And I'll be popping on and off of these slides to have some question sections and some talking to Alex, so we'll be popping on and off, but we'll just start with going through some things. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of an introduction to AbilityNet as an organisation. So AbilityNet is a technology charity that exists to remove the barriers to participation for disabled people at home, at work and in education. And we do this by providing services to individuals, providing them with recommendations for assistive technology and adaptations to meet their needs. And we also offer a wide range of consultancy services and training to organisations, all geared towards offering an inclusive employee and customer experience. So as Pauline did mention, we have got a Slido up and running today. So this is an opportunity in this session for you to ask questions, and I just do want to reiterate that we ask everyone, please be respectful of everyone's right to ask these questions without any judgment. And we know that people tend to get very anxious about saying the wrong thing or causing offence when we're talking about some of these more sensitive topics. So we do just want to make it clear that these sessions are fully designed to give you the opportunity to ask anything that you want. So as we've already mentioned, you can do so in the chat on Teams or by coming off mute and asking us in the Q&A Q&A section, but just be mindful that those will have your name attached to them. If you do want to use this Slido for anonymous questions, that's absolutely fine as well. So there is a QR code on the right hand side of the screen that you can scan. You can get this up then on a smartphone or device to save you from switching from the main presentation, or you can go to slido.com and enter the code, which is 632780 for this session, to ask any of those questions that you want. Okay, so I know Pauline's given us that wonderful introduction, but Alex, did you want to just introduce yourself a bit further and tell us a bit more about what it is that you do at AbilityNet?
Sure. Okay. So good afternoon, everybody, and can I just say it's an honour to be here and to talk about your work that I do. So, and first of all, if you don't know what Moebius Syndrome is, don't be too concerned because not many people do. But I've posted a blog in the chat, so you can go and have a look at it later. So my role in AbilityNet is to help organisations support their service users, whether that's software designers like yourself looking at trying to find out what accessibility challenges people might have, or whether it's working with NHS organisations to make sure that they're being as inclusive as possible, because being inclusive is something that you need to build in right at the start. Being accessible is something that you need to be doing right at the start. I've lost, I can't even remember how many times, more than I've got fingers, that people come to me and say, we've got this project, we want to make it accessible. How do we do it? And it's not like Harry Potter making something magic. You can't just go, let's make it accessible and it will do that. You need to build accessibility in right at the start. And we would prefer it if we could have a discussion with you right before you do a project and say, we can say, this is how to make it accessible. Then right at the end, when I'm going, we haven't made it accessible, what do we do now? Isn't that right, Izzy?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thinking about things from the beginning is always going to be the preferential way. So thank you, Alex. So we'll pop back to the slides now. Okay, so we just so today the session is going to be mainly about the physical and motor impairments. We have Alex here to share his lived experience and expert knowledge. So when we talk about physical impairments, we often focus on physical difficulties a person has, and we often think of the physical impairment as being things like wheelchair users. And indeed, it is often used as a bit of a catch-all for disability. So with disability signs showing someone in a wheelchair, for example, wheelchair users actually make up less than 8% of disabled people. So we may focus on barriers that people face when they're navigating the physical world, things like ramps, steps, drop curbs, the tables and counter heights, and those other obstacles, for example, but there are also many barriers to navigating the digital world, especially as Alex mentioned, when the accessibility of the content isn't considered at that design stage. So in a digital world, our interactions relate to navigating content on screens. The barriers experienced online relate to motor or touch impairments. So things that might restrict us from touching a screen or using a keyboard or being able to operate a mouse. A motor impairment also sometimes relates to limited movement. So this could be as the result of a limb loss or amputation, something congenital that you have from birth, such as a limb absence or deformity. It also includes full or partial paralysis, as well as any unwanted movement, things like tremors. So limited movement and paralysis will make interactions with on-screen targets challenging. So the smaller elements, such as the buttons or the boxes, can be particularly difficult for them to click on. Traditional keyboard and mouse designs can also be difficult or near on impossible for them to use. And those involuntary movements, such as tremors, often affect their accuracy when using a device. So clicking on something small A button or a checkbox with the mouse or a touchscreen can be really frustrating for someone that has a tremor if it's a really small target that they're trying to hit. It's also worth a note that as we age, our skin becomes leatherier, which not also makes it less sensitive, but also less conductive. So this makes it more difficult for us to use things like tablets or other touchscreen devices that recognize touch. And this can be extremely frustrating for some people as well. Okay. So we're going to look at some language do's and don'ts here. So it's a very broad topic, and we understand as well that it's all very relative to the person. I'm sure, Alex, you will agree that something that you might find offensive or not offensive will differ to what somebody else who may have the same condition, may also have Moebius syndrome. They might not like it. You might think it's fine. So we are aware of that, but we just want to give you some general ideas and things to think about and takeaways. So avoid describing someone who is not disabled as normal or able-bodied is a really great place to start. Instead, just use something like non-disabled. And similarly, use wheelchair user rather than wheelchair bound. The neutral language, like living with, is always going to be preferable to suffering from or struggling with or afflicted with, which all have very negative connotations. In the UK, we tend to use the term disabled person, and this highlights a person is disabled by their environment. So if you take away the barrier, the person is no longer disabled. Other countries use the person first term, so person with disabilities. These are places like the US, Canada, and the Republic of Ireland. And in these countries, the term disabled person could be problematic and cause offence. So we are aware that it's a huge issue and it crosses country divides as well as person to person. So there's lots of things to consider, but just try and be mindful of trying to stay as neutral as possible when you're talking. Alex, talking about people's attitudes, I know you have your good example story about going to the that NFL game with your friend. Did you want to share that story?
Okay. So a couple of seasons ago, I went to see an NFL game in London with one of my friends, and I think there was about 3 other people in the car. And we stopped at Oxford Services for a comfort break, and my mate and I are just coming out of the toilet, and we saw this lady of advanced years who points at me and goes, "Oh, hello, dear. Are you going out for a day trip? Have a nice day." And I'm like, "Oh, so she means me." And she wasn't being like rude. She was just seeing what she thought. So now, and when my friend wants to annoy me, he says, "Oh, having a nice day, dear." But actually, it's actually quite a nice story, because she wanted to acknowledge me, but maybe she didn't acknowledge me in the right sort of way. And I think language is really important, because sometimes you want to acknowledge people, you're not quite sure, and you're not quite sure what to say, but it just certainly tells me how things have moved on. Just another point. Years ago, I used to be a member of a FAB club. Now, FAB was physically handicapped and able-bodied. Now, I don't know what they're called now, but it's really interesting to see how language changes over time, isn't it, Lizzie?
Yeah, it's constantly changing. We're always having discussions just internally at AbilityNet. I know the other day we were having a discussion about whether the term deformity should be used, but we were discussing and trying to think of a better alternative. And we think because deformity has been used for so long, especially in a medical setting, it's something that, I mean, you'll probably agree that you're quite used to hearing, Alex, being referred to as having a deformity, but whether we had a huge discussion about whether that had a negative connotation or not, and didn't really come out with a particular outcome.
And it's really interesting because I don't know whether I like the term deformed, but I'm quite happy to say he's got a deformed hand because he has.
Yes.
Like, if you say someone's deformed, it sounds like they're out of a horror movie, which has got even
Exactly.
more, you know.
Yeah, so yeah, it's
I
really
don't know.
interesting. It's forever changing. We are very aware of it, but it's just, you know, to take a minute and think about something before you say it, and ask questions in a positive way rather than a negative way, because I'm sure, Alex, you're always more than happy to talk to people who want to ask you questions if they ask you those questions in a positive, that they want to learn kind of way. I'm sure you'd always be
Sure.
happy to talk to people about
And,
things if they asked you them that way.
yeah, and I think one thing to take away, if you only take one thing away from today's session, I hope you'll take lots of things. Don't just assume, just ask, or you know, because if you ask, someone will tell you, won't they?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, great. So that leaves us on here. What I'm going to do, in light of today and our non-using of bad language, I'm going to skip over this BBC Three video. This is a really good series to go away and have a look at if you have time. BBC Three did this fantastic and very funny series called Things Not to Say to Someone, and there's all sorts of different ones. This one, it was in a wheelchair. There's hearing and visual ones, but just on the grounds of time today, we'll skip over that. But if you do have some time to go and look at that, then please do, and it's going to start playing when I skip over it. Okay, but what I really want to get onto now is Alex's story. So we have popped the Slido back up on the slide here for anybody to jump in who has any particular questions for Alex, but we'll start off by asking Alex, can you tell us about what kind of barriers you've experienced during your working life?
Sure. Okay, so some of the barriers that I've experienced in my working life are situations where I've had to do written, as in like written with a pen work. My writing skills are those of a 5-year-old, and they haven't got much better now that I'm 50. So, anything that requires manual dexterity or doing anything like that is a real barrier to me. Not not so much in work, but I can still remember when you had to write a handwritten letter for a job, and that would always put me off because I'm thinking, if they see someone scrawling a letter, they're going to throw my resume and my CV straight into the bin. Other things that are barriers are maybe not having the right setup at work, and also strange barriers, which it might be expected that there's a communal tea and coffee making system. I can hardly carry a cup, let alone two. And sometimes it's quite difficult for me to say, actually, I'm going to find this really, really hard. But eventually, we find a way around it. I think one of the barriers that I've faced is because I've got facial paralysis. When you talk to me, you're expecting to get some sort of non-verbal communication back, like a smile or a frown or whatever, like eye movement. With me, I have a poker face. Now, I don't play poker, which is a shame because if I could, I'm sure I'd earn lots of money. But the idea, I mean, I love going off and talking to people face to face and doing things like this. But before, it was really difficult because people might take one look at my face and go, he's got a blank face. He doesn't really understand anything that I say. I think that's one of the most important barriers.
Yeah, I've worked in an office with Alex. I can attest to the fact that he did do his fair share of tea making. He would always go and get the water for us. And did the pandemic have any effect on you, positive or negatively, Alex? Did anything change when we had to move to that home working?
So I must apologise. My dog's barking at me.
I can see her tail waggling in the back.
Look.
She's snuck in.
Yeah. Anyway, just bear with me.
He's just going to get rid of the dog. The joys of home working.
I was just going to say, I hope he's humanely getting rid of the dog. Oh, yes, he is.
Oh, yes, he's just humanely got rid of the dog.
I'm really sorry. I've just had to throw the duck down the a stuffed duck down the stairs. Anyway.
So, yeah, so the pandemic, other than the fact that your dog comes to interrupt you during your sessions.
So before the pandemic, I worked in Warwick with Lizzie and the rest of our wonderful team. When the pandemic hit, we were all shipped off to home working. Now, when I came back that day, Wednesday or something like that, I thought, oh my Lord, how am I going to cope with home working? Well, the next Monday I was like, hey, yeah, I like home working. And I think home working has shown companies that if you give people the right technology, they can work from home and they can work really, really effectively. I don't subscribe to any of this, oh, you need to be in the office to work really, really effectively. I work pretty harder at home than I ever did in the office. And I think that's one interesting thing to come out of the pandemic, isn't it, Lizzie?
Yeah, I think that's all round. I think people have probably changed their views, and it's been really helpful. Just for travel as well, for you as well, Alex.
Yeah. So I don't drive, so I got access to work to pay for a taxi to get me from Coventry to Warwick, and each way it was something like £35, and no access to work paid me back. It would take ages because Lizzie would have to sign my paperwork and I'd just have to send it off. And actually, working from home just makes things a little bit easier for me. But by the same token, I'm aware that a lot of people can't work from home. They want to go into an office because sometimes when my wife was working and before we had Bella, our dog, it could be quite lonely at home. So it's nice, but I know it's not right for everyone.
Yeah, it's about striking up that balance, isn't it? Definitely. Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Alex. So we're going to move on now to look at some assistive technology. So Alex, you are a bit of an expert when it comes to some of these. So I've just popped up the slide again if you wanted to take us through some of these assistive technologies.
So from left to right, we've got the AbilityNet Bluetooth switch. So if you've got a condition such as cerebral palsy or MND or something like that, you might want to control your computer just by using a single switch. We all remember Professor Stephen Hawking talking very effectively about the universe. A lot of it went straight over my head, to be honest. But he was using a communication package that was connected to a couple of switches, and switches are really, really effective for lots of people. The glass house head-mounted mouse is great for people who don't have any hand and arm use. And what they can do is they can have a pair of glasses on and they can look at the screen, and when they move their head left, the cursor goes left. When they move their head right, the cursor goes left and right and up and down. And when they get to somewhere where they want to do a mouse click, they just wait a couple of seconds and a mouse click will be made. The Shape-It stylus is really, really good for anyone who wants to use a stylus on a touch screen or an iPad, and basically it can be differently shaped just to make it a little bit easier to grab hold of. The Xbox controller is what it says it is. It's an adaptive controller for your Xbox gaming. So if you've got a Microsoft Xbox, you can game even if you don't have all your fingers or need specialist switches. If you turn the Xbox adaptive controller around, you've got lots of ports at the back to put extra switches in, and the PlayStation Project Leonardo is a new device, which I only saw for the first time on Tuesday.
Yeah, we
And yeah,
haven't got our hands on one of those yet to have a go with, but looks good.
It certainly looks good, and basically it has got lots of adaptable pedals that will do lots of different functions in a game, and a really adjustable joystick. So if you want to play football or Tomb Raider or just shoot people up, virtually, of course, you can use one of these adaptive games controllers.
Yeah, they're fantastic. So, okay, so and then we'll move on to the next slide, which is specific assistive technologies that you use, Alec.
Yeah. So although at the moment I have a standard setup, my preferred way of working is with a compact keyboard. So a compact keyboard is basically a smaller keyboard than a standard one. So if you look at this keyboard, it's got a number pad on it. See, the number pad's on here. A compact keyboard doesn't have a number pad on it, and it means you don't have to stretch from one side of the keyboard to the other. So all your keys are quite nicely in a sort of compact style.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I use occasionally is Dragon Naturally Speaking, or it's actually called Nuance now, which is really confusing. Been around for absolutely ages and is voice recognition. So if I want to dictate an email or dictate a Word document or just go online to look at a website, I can do this by using my voice. The great thing about it is that although I've got a typical speech, so I have got a slight speech impediment, and I can use it fairly well to get to where I need to get to. The other thing that is really useful for me, and I need to try and get another one, is a Kensington rollerball. So this means I can just use my fingers on top of the rollerball, and this is really good for people who might have a tremor and end up hitting the buttons on the mouse when they don't really want to. Now the mouse buttons are spread to the left and the right, and it's a bit of an easier area to actually hit on.
Yeah, you don't actually have to move your hand or your arm at all with that one, do you?
Sure.
The mouse remains stationary and you just move the ball. So anybody who has a arm or shoulders movement impairment will be able to just roll the ball with their fingers.
Sure, so. And it's really good for people that have got RSI or carpal tunnel or any other and issue.
Yeah, and there's lots of different variations of these kinds of technologies. These are just some to highlight that you find helpful. So fantastic. Okay.
Thanks.
So again, just looking at the time, I'm going to skip over these two videos. Again, we will share the links with them. They're really useful to look at some projects that Google have been working on. So we will just come to another slide just to offer that Slido for opportunity for questions. I have popped the Slido in the chat as well, and they are coming through. So just as Pauline said at the beginning, what we'll do is we'll just hold for the Q&A at the end. But I can see, Kevin, thank you for sharing your question as you go. If you do think of anything as we are talking, please do pop it in now so we can refer back to you in the Q&A session at the end. Okay. So moving on to our next thing, we're going to look at some tips for removing those barriers. So we have the notion that we would like a little bit of interaction from you here. So we often think about disabilities or impairments as being permanent, but actually they can also be temporary or in fact situational. So here on the screen in this graphic that we have taken from the Microsoft Inclusive Design Toolkit, we have an example of a permanent disability. So with touch, this is someone demonstrated on the slide as someone with one arm. So what we'd like you to just do is have a quick think about, you can pop in the chat if you have any ideas on what something that was considered to be a temporary physical impairment might be. So a physical impairment that is just going to affect someone on a temporary basis. Fantastic. There we go, Pauline. Straight in with one there. Broken arm in a cast. Yeah. Brilliant. Got a couple of more, see if anyone else has got some. Yeah, broken arms. Andy, I'm going to come back to your second one in a minute. Okay, so yes, so the Microsoft example is an arm injury and it does show someone in a cast. So yes, so broken arms and arm injuries, fantastic. Yes, so these are things that are going to affect you on a temporary basis, but eventually something like an arm injury will hopefully you will recover from. But those things that Alex talked about, you know, the dragon, the voice dictate is going to be really helpful for a person in this situation who might not be able to use their keyboard and won't be very proficient at doing it one-handed either. Okay, and then we go on to situational. So Andy, your example here, your second one, is definitely something that would come up under more of a situational impairment, which is Andy put holding a baby. And there was another holding something. Alex has put holding a dog. So yeah, so a situational is where, yes, so on the Microsoft there is a new parent. So yes, holding a baby, a dog, holding something, doing the washing up even, and your hands are wet, so you can't touch anything technologically. It's going to be a situational impairment. So the situation that you are in, meaning that you don't have your hands available. Okay. So now we're going to look at some of those things that we need to think about with those barriers and some of the things that we maybe need to think about to remove those environmental barriers. So Alex, do you want to take us through the online content? So any barriers to online content?
Sure. Okay. So although I can use a keyboard and a mouse, for understandable reasons it takes me a bit longer. So I really hate trying to buy concert tickets and the concert ticket timer says you've got 5 minutes to complete this purchase before it times out. You all know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I'm desperate. I'm trying to get this ticket for my favorite band, and it's just unnecessary because it puts you under quite a lot of pressure. And if you've got a really detailed website with lots of links and the links are really small, there might be a small link that you've got to click on, and for someone who's got hand and arm disabilities, that's really hard to do. And if you've got to do drag and dropping, lots of websites have got great interactive media and it looks really nice, but sometimes I wonder whether accessibility's been thought about, because dragging and dropping can be quite difficult to do.
Impossible if you're a keyboard user rather than a mouse user. You can't do a drag and drop exercise with keyboard shortcuts, I don't believe.
So a really good example is I do lots of photography. I've got a Flickr website, and Flickr is basically a community, and you can sort your images into different sections or different albums. Yeah, that's great if you can use a mouse. I have no idea how to do it if you're not a mouse user. I think it would be horrendously difficult. Checking keyboard controls and navigation. is really, really important. So a lot of people do not use a mouse. A lot of people use the keyboard. You've got to check the keyboard controls and navigation works if you're using just a keyboard. Don't just assume that everyone's going to use a mouse. And following on from that, you've got to check focus indication. So, for example, if you're on a website, you can press Alt and Tab, and it should cycle through all your links. But sometimes, no, sorry, yeah, Alt and Tab. But sometimes you see websites and you try to move through with a keyboard and you get really, really lost and it doesn't seem to work with a keyboard. So checking the focus indication is really, really important. Perhaps get someone to test your website who doesn't use a mouse.
Yeah, or just tabbing through is a really good start point, I often find. And on Chrome as well, I know that there's an add-on to Chrome that's called Focus Indicator, and what that will do is when you turn it on, it puts a box around the target that you are on, and as you press tab through, the box moves. So if you do need that visual representation, it gives you that visual representation of the box moving through, because sometimes when you're tabbing, it's not always clear where you're jumping to, but your tabs should go in a methodical order that you would read the page in, and that you would be able to, it should follow that all the way throughout, so that anybody who is tabbing through the tab that's not a keyboard user goes through that page in order. Okay. So onto some barriers with documents. Alex, what have we got here?
Okay. Right, so I'm sure everyone here likes to read long documents, but sometimes you just want to get to the actual nerd of what a document is trying to say. So we would always say that you've got to make sure that the summary is accessible so you can go straight. Yeah, if you've got a document of 10,000 words, the summary might be 500. You just want to get to the summary, and having a document that says go to summary is always really, really important. Table of contents is also really important. If you've got a document that's got 20 chapters or 20 sections on it, you might want to go to section 17. You can go page down, of course you can. Actually, an easier way of going to chapter 17 or page 17 is to just click on a link which says go to page 17. Headings and navigation is always really important. So basically, what it means is like on a website you might have your introduction, then your main chapter headings, then your additional chapter headings, and it's just a nicer way of being able to identify what's important in a document. And basically, reflow means that it's a document that can adapt to presentation on an output device. So basically, it just makes the text a little bit easier to read when you've got images in it.
Yep, so if you were to scroll in on the page and make the text really big, the text with reflow will adapt. So you don't have to slide your bar across the screen as well as up and down your screen. So the bigger it gets, the smaller lines of text, and it just reflows and moves it along to the next line. So you don't lose text off the end of your screen when you scroll in and out.
And I think it's really important to point out here that this is great for everybody. They don't have to be disabled to get the advantages of, and everyone now has to read lots and lots of information, take in lots of information. Just make it as easy as possible for people.
Mm-hmm. And if you set up your Word document, for example, with the correct headings, and not just, it's about thinking, not just, you don't just visually do this, there is a heading section within Word where you mark up the headings correctly, then that opens up into the master, and people can jump through those headings, especially as well as, I know we're talking about physical and motor today, but people with visual impairments that use screen readers, for them headings is really key. But it's also, as Alex said, really useful for everyone. I learned the other day that if you set up all of your headings and your subheadings and you write all of your text underneath, so you have your subheading with a whole paragraph, you can go into the back and you can click and drag your subheading up the list, and it will move the whole part of your document. It would move the whole paragraph up your document to another part without you having to copy and paste or cut and paste. If you've got your headings in there correctly, you can just drag it up, which was fantastic for me as well as another thing, that if the document's set up correctly, multiple uses for everyone.
And I think it's really important to just take time to get these things in place. I know sometimes when we write documents, we're like, right, we've got to get a document done, let's just do it, and let's just go back and sort things out at the end. If you get your heading sorted out, if you get your tables of content sorted out, it's just going to be a much better experience for everyone.
And on the Microsoft Suite as well, everybody. So across the whole Microsoft Suite now, there is the accessibility checker, where you can turn on the accessibility checker, and it will give you tips and guides to the accessibility that you might need to look at within your document, and give you hints and tips on how to make those changes as well. So that's a really good place to start from if you're a little bit unsure of whether your document is accessible. So use that accessibility checker. It normally comes up if you're using the desktop versions. There's a little man in the left hand corner that says check accessibility, but it's also in the review bar as well. Okay, so on to media. Alex, do you want to tell us a little bit about barriers that might come about in media?
Sure. So everyone knows that, if you're on the internet, it's a multimedia experience. You watch lots of videos or listen to music and content. But sometimes it's really difficult because the controls tend to be really, really small and often quite difficult to actually access, and especially if you're a keyboard user. And it's really important, if you're working with multimedia presentations, you've got to make sure that you can turn the volume down or up, or you can press play or stop or go to the next slide independently. And I think it gets more important when you talk about volume, because sometimes with different sorts of videos, there's no sort of standard volume, so you might be listening to something that is quite loud in your earphones, and you want to try it, turn it down. Can you actually try and turn it down if you're a keyboard user, or would you have to use the mouse? And I think it's really important because media conveys so much, but if it's not accessible, people aren't going to be engaged by it.
Yes, exactly. And I don't know whether people should be grateful or not, but in these short sessions, as opposed to our longer sessions, we don't torture you with a YouTube video of the Barney Love You song and try and make you turn it on and off with your keyboard, which we do in our longer session. But yeah, it's just, things to be mindful of. That volume one, again, it's going to be really beneficial, not just in the kind of motor impairment setting, but for lots of people, cognitive, hearing impairments. Thinking about that is going to cross all of those different impairments and help a lot of people again. And just people like me, I don't like it when I get flustered, especially if I'm wearing my headphones and I click a video and it auto plays at like 200% volume. It's just not very pleasant for anybody. Okay. So the last one that we have, Alex, is just some cultural barriers that you might want to think about.
So ask what technology people are comfortable to work with. So for example, Although ironically, I don't use any special technology, I could apply for a new job. Don't worry, I don't want to use AbilityNet. I could apply for a new job and they could go, okay, what technology do you want? Let's get you a special keyboard. Let's get you a special mouse. And they're like, no, it's okay. I can use standard stuff. And it's always really, really good not to make assumptions, but just to ask what technology people might want to use. Remember that the user is your subject matter expert. If you've got someone who's got arthritis who comes to your business, don't go, oh, my granny had arthritis, I know about arthritis, because your granny's experience of arthritis might well be different to your employee's experience of arthritis or Parkinson's or whatever. Please never make it awkward when people ask for text. Don't go, well, we're going to have to fill in 25 documents and 7 forms and it'll take ages. Because people will go, well, I'll just struggle with whatever I've got. You've got to make it really a pleasant experience for people to try and get the technology that they want. Also, it's a really good idea to make sure that everyone's got technology in place before they start. Don't start thinking, well, it'll take 6 weeks for the technology to arrive. Let's just arrive it when they turn up. What are you going to do for 6 weeks? Hot desking might be an issue. So I worked in a call center where I would have my keyboard on my desk, but when I needed a hot desk, I would have to take my keyboard to and from work and then make sure that it was all ready to go. You know, you've got to think, okay, if you've got someone who uses assistive technology, do they need the hot desk? Also, a really, really good idea to have lots of scheduled breaks. You know, sometimes in work, especially in training sessions, people will ask, is everyone okay to power on so we can all go home early? Because everyone wants to go home early, don't they? Apart from Dave at the back who says, well, I might want to go to the toilet or to take my insulin pen or to take my medication halfway through. And but Dave doesn't want to speak up because Dave doesn't want people to know about his disability. So you could build in scheduled breaks and go, you know what we're going to do? We're going to take a scheduled break for 10 or 15 minutes, go and get a coffee, go and do what you need to do. We'll be back here at 10 o'clock or whatever. And it helps everybody.
Yeah.
Doesn't it, Lizzie?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, you're not enforcing them, that person that has to speak up. Okay, fantastic. So that is the end of our presentation bit, and fantastically, almost as if we timed it, that leaves us a good 10 minutes to go to the Q&A section. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen now so we can see everybody. So I think there have been some that have come through in the chat, and I know that Pauline, I think you have some as well. So if you wanted to kick us off.
Yes, well, actually, that was just brilliant. So thank you for that. Learned so much. I do remember some stories from my past as well with people who were actually in a wheelchair having a can of drink, sitting outside a shop, and somebody put some money in their pot, thinking they were collecting for charity, and we did take the mickey out of him for quite a while. So yeah, thank you. Right, so we got some questions. Is there any in the chat? Let me just double check in the chat. If not, I'll lead off with the first one.
I think there might have been one that came through in the chat.
Oh yes, Kevin did one, didn't he? What are your top 5 frustrations around using business software? And he did say you can go above 5 if you want.
Okay. I think I'm not sure I can think of 5, but let me just think of a couple. I would say the inability to change the accessibility requirements. So, for example, I've used the package, and it's been quite hard to change the accessibility features to have it displayed in a different color or a different background. It's been written, it's like bright white with, I know, red text on, and I'm thinking, it's quite hard for me to see it. And I've gone into accessibility options, and the accessibility options have been disabled for this piece of software, so I can't change the way that I view that package. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah.
The other one that I think that's important is if everything is grouped together. If a system has got lots of different links and I'm having to squint because I can't work out whether I need to click on that link or this link. And the other thing is, of course, that we've just discussed time. Now, is there a time element to get stuff in? I don't want to be seeing like the countdown clock when it ticks down. I don't want to be seeing that because it just puts an awful lot of pressure on me that I don't actually need. I think the other one is it keyboard accessible? If I just want to use the keyboard one day, can I do that? And I think the other thing is I don't use text to speech, but I know a lot of people use text to speech. If I get text to speech to work with this app or this program, is it going to make any sense, or is it just going to give me lots of rubbish that I don't really understand?
Yeah.
I think that's the 5.
That's good. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, you mentioned Lizzie about Microsoft, but I know Google do the same. I know that
Yes,
there's a lot of
yeah.
open sharing on their accessibility. And interestingly, I went onto our website and you can tab, which I was quite impressed with. I didn't realise that.
Yeah,
but
I shared that focus indicator as well in the chat because Steve asked
yeah,
for
you did.
it. So, yeah.
And I think that's that's something simple that we could all go back and check our websites. Do they actually tab through? So I do think that's a good one to test. Anyway, I keep moving around. Right, so we got that. So let's I've got some questions here. So as an organization, you can't do anything to help if nobody's telling you you're disabled. So I must admit, I'm a bit like this. So I do use Dragon sometimes because I end up getting frozen shoulders and get frustrated typing, but I don't actually say anything at work that I mean, they provided the software in this case, but how do you actually help people if they don't want to disclose? And as I say, I'm as guilty as that as anybody.
I think, in fact, at AbilityNet, it's been a real kind of hot topic for us recently about we don't even really like using the word disclose. We've had a big discussion and we have decided, well, we think we've decided that we've started to move more into the idea of sharing. We don't want anybody to feel like they have to say when there is something. And as we've just discussed kind of throughout the presentation that we did today, we put the focus on the barriers being to the environment rather than the barriers being to the person. And if you start to think about the barriers being with the environment, you can start to think about things that you can change at an organizational level that are going to be really helpful to people, whether they've told you that they have a condition or not. So if you start to think about those environmental barriers, and then, like we said, like that Microsoft piece really explains really nicely, you start thinking about removing the barriers in your environment. It's going to help not only your permanently disabled colleagues, but also those ones that have those situational and temporary. And by having those things in place, by advertising that you're having those things in place, you make yourself known and seen as a really inclusive organization and company to be working for, and that in turn will probably make people more comfortable to then share their specifics with you. If you advertise all of the things that you've done, you put out something that says, look everybody, we've got all of this stuff in place, we've had to think about it, we've made all of these changes at an organizational level, and then as a colleague who maybe has a condition that they haven't felt like they could share, have gone, oh, my organisation really cares about accessibility and putting things in place. So I can comfortably go and talk to them now about my specific needs and hopefully open that conversation. We want it to be a conversation, and we want people to be sharing rather than disclosing.
I think that's a really good way of putting it, is about enabling people to feel that they are comfortable to share the challenges they might have, regardless of how they may or may not define themselves.
Yeah.
Kevin's asked a question: having been appalled at seeing wheelchairs, imagery kind of thing, what should business software be using in the marketing and opening screens to show that they're very broad in ranging? I should let you just said this really, Kevin, in regards to accessibility to wider context. Are there international standards or best practices here? So I really think that it's like, when you use the word disabled, I think the automatic image is a wheelchair, and to your point, what was it, 88% are in wheelchairs, kind of thing. So,
this is something else that actually I've been recently with my colleagues in our team when we've been developing e-learning and things. It's conversations that we've been having, because I don't think there is any international standards or best practice, and we have also found that a lot of the imagery that you see, it might be, if it's someone with a visual impairment, you might see a blind person with a cane looking lost in a big sea of people, and that's not the case at all. A blind person with a cane is absolutely superb of getting around. They know exactly where they are, where they're going, and 99% of the time don't need your help. But a lot of imagery and media portrayal has been sort of on the negatively kind of side of them needing help, and oh, look at this poor person, and that's not the case at all. But there isn't really that standard, and there probably should be. I don't know whose responsibility it would be to do that, but I would just always try and avoid, where possible, using any of those ones that are obviously negative, and maybe
stereotyping.
And maybe we've in our e-learning packages as well, we've obviously we are a technology for people charity, so we've gone with imagery that kind of is more around the tech, so not around the people at all. So on our e-learning package, even if it's for a specific condition, we might use the imagery of like a laptop or a piece of assistive technology, just to avoid anything that might have a person in it at all. But it's a very difficult one to talk about, Kevin. A huge thing to think about.
I mean, it's a really good example, because my colleague Addy and I and another colleague went to Munich and for some of her work event, and we got a bit lost, and Addy had his iPhone out, and he said, okay, I've got Apple Maps on, we need to go that way. Now, if you'd seen a picture of him doing that, there's nothing to identify that he's actually blind. He's just a guy using...
He's a naughty guy, by the way. That's all I would say.
Yeah. Don't tell me.
Addy and
I
Alex
know
went
about.
to Munich.
I know
there was
about
definitely beer involved.
Yeah,
definitely.
And he's just a guy using a smartphone.
Yeah.
There are lots of guys and women, of course, that use smartphones, aren't there?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point to make there, isn't it? Sort of another question that we had, Lizzie. I know we're nearly at time. Should we just do one more question?
Yeah, do one more. If anybody needs to go, though, please do. We're aware that people have other...
Otherwise, we'll just keep talking, which would be very bad for everyone. One of the other ones, physical disabilities are not always obvious, and you can't force someone to disclose, which we sort of said. No. How do we encourage somebody to be... I think it's a little bit what you said. It's about making that environment, supportive and that. Have you got any sort of tips on how to make a supportive and inclusive environment? Because I think that's the best bit, isn't it?
Yeah, I think just make people aware of what you're doing and take small steps at a time. You might look at it and think, oh my God, this scary, huge beast of accessibility and making things inclusive for everyone. There's so much to do, but you know, focus on one thing at a time. And publicize and make people aware that you've looked at all of these things, you've got all of these things to work on, and you've worked on this bit, and just let them know. And then
communication kind of thing, keeping
keep
that
open communication, and make it easy for people to ask for things. Like make it really easy for them to do. Don't make it a complicated process for them having to fill in, like Alex said, fill in this form to do this, to wait 6 weeks, to have one meeting, to then wait another 6 weeks for another. Try and make it as easy as you possibly can for people to do that, and for people to, you know, just report back to you something that they might have seen, you know, that you might not have looked at. Have that open communication, but make it easy and offer it in lots of different ways as well, so people feel comfortable doing that, and just show that you're willing to take that on board, listen, and then try and work with them and develop them, because there'll be people in your organization that will have a vast knowledge. As Alex said, these guys are the user experts in their area, and you want to tap into that knowledge, so make it easy for them to share that with you in the first place and get that conversation going.
Excellent. Well, I know we've over time, so thank you both. So thanks, Alex and Lizzie, for your time and presentation today.
Thank you.
I'm sure, I know a few people have gone off, but I'm sure everybody really enjoyed it. And I did see that any questions that we haven't got round to doing, we'll share out later with the recording from Carol.
There was nothing in the Slido, Carol, so just so you're aware, everybody was asking in here. But yeah, if anybody does have any follow-ups that they would like to take away after the session, please do reach out to us at AbilityNet. Alex is available. He loves a challenge as well. Give him a challenge. Try and ask him a question that's really challenging, and he can go away and think about it for a really long time. But yeah, do reach out to AbilityNet. You know, all of our details and ways to contact us are on our website. We're at the end of the phone or an email, so please do come to us.
And the thing is, just remember now, your question you might think is really, really silly or stupid. Now, please just ask it, because I think it's really important that you've got all the information that you can at your fingertips.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thank you. And Addy is my vice chair of the Ability Special Interest Group. So I think he and I caused chaos in the House of Lords recently, so we won't go down that one either. But yes, thank you very much for joining us, Alex and Lizzie, and thank the members for doing that. And we'll look forward to you all joining us soon, and take it easy, everyone. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.